Good afternoon, YouTube. This is LA Prepper, and we're doing something we haven't done in a really long time. We are doing a normal, boring, recorded video. Wow, and I tell you, it doesn't feel the same as doing it live, but that's okay. So, you will be alive when you watch it, so close enough. Today we're looking at some dual sport motorcycles. I've had this itch, so to speak, for a while. I owned one numerous years ago and loved the heck out of it. So I am looking to pick up another one, not just for fun, not just for prepping, kind of just because they're awesome. I don't know. I don't know what to say. If you ride motorcycles, you understand what I'm saying, and if you don't, maybe this isn't the most exciting video for you, so I'm sorry about that, but they are quite phenomenal machines. I mean, if you came up to a random person and said, for $2,000 or less, I want you to give me a machine that can go almost anywhere for a few bucks at speeds ranging from 1 or 2 miles an hour up to 70 miles an hour, in any condition in a city, in the country, aside from, going over water, what would your solution be? Your solution is essentially a dual spoke motorcycle, or maybe a cheap, busted Jeep. But on an ongoing basis, the comparison between a Jeep and a dirt bike, they're kind of hugely different, besides the fact that they're different vehicles. So yes, maybe you could get a used horse for less than $2,000 or a cheap Jeep for less than $2,000. But the bottom line is, for what this vehicle can do, for the very little cost that it takes to maintain, they're kind of like little mechanized horses. It's kind of a good way of describing them. Horses are a very versatile creature. A lot of people, city people, I think when you look at a horse, you think, oh, well, you could ride it or they race and that's about it, right? But horses were kind of the original tractors. I mean, yeah, people used oxes and mules and stuff like that, but people used horses for a really long time. So this is like horse 2.0. Without further ado, let's take a look at the 3 different options of motorcycles that we have here. They're all dual sports. We have a Yamaha XT350, 1986, somewhere around 8,000 miles. A 1993 Suzuki DR350 dual sport with a few more miles, but still not a huge amount. I think 14,000? Yeah, 14,000. An XR600 with an unknown number of miles, which usually means over 20 or 30, but it's an older bike, so you're gonna have that. So let's talk about the different bikes, their strengths, their weaknesses, and why someone might want one bike over the other. I'm gonna start with the plain Jane, so to speak, dual sport. The DR350 is a very solid choice for a dual sport motorcycle. Of course, in more recent years, Suzuki came out with the DR400. DM and S and all these different letters anyway. But it was all a DR or DRZ400 or DR400Z, something like one of those two. Or maybe even DRZ400Z. You never know with these guys. I had a FZR 600R because you got to have that extra R. It adds to the speed. See, this couldn't just be the 350. They could have called it a Suzuki 350 or a Suzuki D350, but they called it the Suzuki DR350, and they threw on that S because S stands for speed, and R is like, racing, so dirt racing, speed, it's like super fast, so anyways, just in case you didn't know, fast bike. Fairings make it faster too, and the blue. It's there's a lot of things that go into the design of a motorcycle that you might not realize, but having a seat match the frame adds speed, fairing adds speed, graphics add speed, sick coilover or sick shock covers in the matching color add speed. All these things add speed. So this thing has some new tires. Seat's a little messed up, but overall, how does it perform as a dual sport? probably very, very well. Most people say very good things about their DRs and love them to death. And the only thing bad that someone might say about this bike is maybe it doesn't have as much clearance as a Honda, as certain Hondas like the XR line or XL, depending on the year. And maybe, you know, that's kind of about it. The clearance, and maybe some people have like little issues with little minor details about the bike. I don't know if this thing has like a doohickey. Certain bikes have really, really unique things that go wrong with them. I think the KLR has something like that, but maybe the Hondas too. But overall, pretty solid bike. Has an electric start as well. Says needs a battery. So it has an electric start, which can be nice in the city, and to be honest, can be nice on the trail. You know, if you're on some steep ass hill, you're not always in a good position to kickstart the bike, and sometimes you would kind of prefer to have the bike running than not running. So, you know, I don't mind kickstarting a bike, but maybe if you're older, you're not as strong, or you hurt your foot years ago, having the electric start's nice. It really is. So, I don't think it's a big deal for the weight of the battery and the starter, really. Some people might think it's not as pure, but to be honest, most bikes have an electric start, so, you know, unless you're Mad Max, don't feel too bad if your motorcycle has an electric start. So really solid bike. The guy wants a little bit more maybe than it's worth, but he's just trying to anchor his, you know, it's got new tires. Maybe he's trying to get a little more for that. So, and deservedly so. New tires cost a couple $100 or something. So installed maybe 250, 300, depending on the tire. So option number one, kind of plain, but very reliable, generally good performing dual sport. Number two is kind of a weird one. Number two is a kind of a funky bike, and I say funky mainly because it has this dual carb thing. You can look it up. I think Regular Cars or Regular Car Review, Regular Car Guy Reviews has a video on it, but just look up some reviews. It has dual carbs because they wanted to get better low RPM response that an idle jet can provide. So they put in the mechanically actuated carb is the smaller one and gets you going at all speeds, but is mainly there for the lower end fuel delivery, because on the upper end there's a vacuum operated carburetor which adds more fuel on the upper end because Yamaha. So anyways, we got that going on. It's real low miles. It's only got 8,800 miles, which is making it very, very attractive to me, because miles on a dual sport especially can be a little hard. You know, 1,000 miles on the dirt is a lot harder on a bike than 1,000 miles on the street. That being said, riding on the dirt, riding in general with these engines are very robust, single cylinder, even though this one does have dual overhead cams, which is a little bit of a drawback. In my opinion anyways. Yes, mechanically it might breathe better, but it also makes it more work, more valves to adjust, you know, just more kind of concern, more of a headache in regards to that. Too many cams, too many carbs, but still potentially a pretty high-end vehicle. This one's super clean. I like the look to it. It has a nice cargo rack. I mean, just look at that. Like, even the shock tubes are clean. Like, this thing has not been off-roaded recently, if maybe ever, probably, but you know, you can see some rust and some wear on the handles and stuff. Actually, this is really interesting. These striations, these marking scratches on the lens, you can tell the guy was either fell, and that's from the asphalt. Actually, that is probably from the asphalt, but it could be from trees and brush. Sometimes you hit like bigger branches and they'll scuff your... I'm not too worried about that. That'll sand out, primer that up. Not too big of a deal. Of course, matching the paint color, which is kind of a cream, but it's faded, so it's like faded cream. That tends to be a little more of a headache. Plus, you have the graphic, which is probably a decal, and unless you replace it, you know, taking the decals off when they're old, sometimes you can use a heat gun, but that can be kind of an issue. Tank looks pretty clean, and to be honest, tell you what I like about this pick. I like this pick more because he included it, or he or she included it, than because of what I'm seeing in there. Just the fact that they thought, look, I not only emptied the tank, but here's a picture of the empty tank, that really indicates that someone gives two shits about their bike, right? Plus, his backyard's kind of nice, so I'm always looking at that. I'm always looking at their backyard. How's the hose coiled? If this hose was all in a mess, like all strewn around the yard, automatically negative points for this guy. But look, he's got some nice plants. Yeah, the grass is a little beat up, but maybe he just, doesn't want to water it too much. But it's got some nice furniture. I'm always looking when I go to people, and, I'm familiar with the neighborhood, but always looking. See how this is clean? His walkway's all clean. He doesn't have, like, dog toys or kids' toys or garbage, or he's not hoarding, magazines or whatever. He's got the title and registration, and he's got a picture of it. This real clear picture of the odometer. Remember the last guy's picture of the odometer was kind of like, I don't think he was trying to obfuscate it, but nevertheless, it's kind of hard to read. And even look at the pitting. Like, look at the pitting on the gauges, just from wear and tear, whereas these ones look considerably cleaner. Plus, the speedometer goes up to 100, and I appreciate that. What is this one? Oh, this one goes up to 100 too, I think. No, there was one of the other ones I was looking at only went up to like 80 or something. 75. So aside from the weird dual carb issue and the fact that it has dual cams, this Yamaha I think would perform very well off-road and on-road. I will say something about the displacement once I get to the third option here. I will say on my many, ongoing lifelong research of dual sports, I've read things here and there about the XT frames potentially being a little bit weak. And I think as well, if you notice, I believe the engine is a structural component of these bikes. Maybe it's not, but I think it is. Meaning that it's just a little bit different. Instead of having a full frame, sometimes you'll use the engine as part of the frame. So does that contribute to being stronger or weaker? That's up for the engineers to decide. I just mention it because it's kind of something interesting to keep in mind. I really love these dual air cooling duct intakes, I think, to add, at least that's what I think they are, to add airflow. I don't, unless they're intake for the engine, but anyways. So option number 2, a little bit funky, but good running, very clean XT350. Option number 3 is a 1991 XR600R for $1,200. It's fair. It doesn't have any mileage on it, unfortunately, or at least not that's indicated. But as far as the quality of the seller, we do have the VIN listed. It's always nice. It's always nice when they list the VIN. It means you can do a theft search on it, and it just means, in my opinion, they're a little bit more forthright of an owner. Now, let me tell you something interesting about this pick. See how he has it like nicely lined up? He's got it. He could have had it skewed. He could have had a bunch of other crap, but he took an extra 2 moments to frame the picture. Like, look, that's a very well framed picture. He zoomed in nice, got on the kickstand. It's not immaculate, but it's not, it's not filthy. It actually looks kind of dusty more than muddy. He's got pictures from both sides. It's running, needs some fresh gas. He says it's been sitting, but I cleaned out the pilot jet and it started right up. So that's kind of thoughtful. Air filter had rotted, so I removed it. Seems plausible. Just canceled the insurance. Turn signals are broken, blah, blah, blah. But, I appreciate that. Like, you can't tell from the picture that the turn signals are cracked, but you would get there and you'd be like, wow, these turn signals are cracked. That's kind of a bummer. So the fact that he mentions it just kind of means that he's trying to be a little bit more straightforward. And even the fact that they detail out stuff in the ad. Sometimes people don't really detail out the ad. Like this guy, year, half pink slip, needs battery, has some stuff, this is the price. Whereas this guy is writing a bunch of sentences about what's going on. So that kind of indicates pretty honest guy. This guy's pretty honest too. He took a bunch of pictures, but and this guy, decent enough, had the most pictures, And so kind of a short description, but the most pictures, and I think the pictures did justice, you know, the odometer, the title. This person, a few less pictures, has the year in here, doesn't have the year over here. Does indicate he has title here, but not on the search details, which kind of is to their own detriment. So what do you think, YouTube? Kind of been rambling on about these three different bikes here, but we have the kind of plain Jane, where the person wants a little bit too much for it, which makes me a little cautious just because I feel like if they're anchoring that high, they're not going to want to take a more modest price. And is the bike worth closer to $1,200-$1,300? Yeah, maybe. You know, I haven't done the Kelley Blue Book on this, but in fact, let's take a quick look for the heck of it at the Kelley Blue Book for a... Of course, I always go the trade-in value because suggested retail value, a lot of people click on that, but they don't realize that that's what you're going to pay from a dealer. That's not, retail is not you selling it out of your garage. That's private party, and private party is not the same as retail. But anyways, so trade-in value, which is what the actual cash they'll give you for the bike, is $1,000. So the real value is, in my opinion, somewhere typically between trade-in and suggested retail, citing a little closer to trade-in. So I would rate that bike somewhere around $1,200, give or take. Maybe $1,250, $1,300 if it's super clean, closer to $1,100 if it's a little beat up. So that takes care of that. That takes care of that one. The XT, probably similar because of something that economists like to call marginal utility. Well, maybe that's not the right term. Marginal utility is how much extra utility you get out of the extra unit, but I guess I'm trying to say it has kind of a baseline utility. There's always a certain amount of work that a dual sport can do, and no matter the year and the make or the exact model of the motorcycle, you're always going to have a certain value. Interesting, the 86 actually has a higher retail value. Sometimes the years weight kind of heavily on that. Trade-in value is $1,950. So really fascinating that the XT actually has a $100 higher trade-in value than the newer DR. That's really interesting to me. Well, anyways. Now let's take a look at the XR, which I suspect is going to be even higher than both of those because they're very sought after motorcycles, because they're considered that the Hondas in general are sort of considered superior off-road, at least as far as dual sports. I don't know about the dirt line, but off-road Honda's always just had gobs of clearance. They've tried to make their bikes light. They've always tried to make them pump out a lot of horsepower. They've really kind of always focused on, at least from a lot of stuff that I've researched and kind of looked into, that's been kind of my finding. Okay, so back to Kelley Blue Book search on these ones. On the Honda, as time clicks away and I'm ready to head to work here. Yeah, wow, see what I mean? Y'all probably didn't believe me. You were like, this guy, LA prepper, he doesn't know what he's talking about. You know, it's not going to be worth that much more. Boom, retail value, $2,815. That's how much more sought after these bikes are. Trade-in value, $1,500. So when I see this bike for sale at $1,200, knowing full well that the trade-in value is closer to this, it really makes me think, that's a pretty screaming ass deal for this bike, in my opinion. So it's tempting. It's very tempting. Take a little drive down here. Probably be about 40 minutes for me. I got a friend in Downey though, so maybe I could go take a look at the bike and then circle back and hit up my buddy for lunch. That would be kind of a fun day. Be a super, super solid bike. Better on the freeway than the smaller bikes. That's the only thing about the bigger bikes, is that they do tend to have a little more horsepower, so they tend to be a little more manageable at high speeds. I mean, a small bike's manageable at high speeds, but It's mostly not like a small bike's not stable, but you know if you ride bikes that a heavier bike tends to cruise a little more smoothly, and little bumps and wind and stuff like that tend to not disturb it so much, on a bigger bike. So off-road, the weight is somewhat of a detriment unless you're talking about inertia. Sometimes inertia is nice when you're trying to go up some big-ass hill. You want to get that speed and energy. Or something really, really steep. It's nice to have the inertia of the heavy bike to hold you up against that hill as you're going up something steep. But if you fall, you run out of gas, it lands on your leg, or you're in some weird angle, going over really, really rocky stuff, and it's just beating the crap out of you all day, it can wear on you. It's definitely not a bike for a smaller person. I'm 6'3", and I'm kind of skinny at about 170, but still have enough leverage to kind of ride comfortably something like this. So I got to get ready for work and go, but I just wanted to share some of my thoughts on some of these 3 different motorcycles. So like, comment, subscribe, keep prepping, and keep riding. Talk to you next time, YouTube.